Taos in Baltimore. Yes, sometimes the guest chases me. I wanted to have this guy on because A, the World Series is over. I wanted to get all of my best baseball people under one rooftop here during this 2-week bye period and just talk some baseball, talk about the offseason, doff our caps to the Astros and cry a river for the Dodgers and everyone else. So I figured it's a good time to bring one of our defending champs, one of my favorite guests. He's out in Portland, Oregon, pining away for a Major League Baseball franchise. And oh, what it would have meant for the Washington Nationals to have landed there 12 years ago. He is Bizball Maury out on Forbes and on Twitter. And we welcome Maury Brown back, our rock and rollist from the Shoot the Thrill AC/DC cover band and purveyor of all thoughts hot stove. What's going on, Maury? How are you?
I'm great, Nestor. I'm actually doing a heck of a lot of baseball stories right now as we start to wrap up. So, it's an interesting time. I don't know if I've ever been busier than where I've been in this last week and a half or so.
Well, baseball stories, so do tell. I mean, the offseason begins like right around the back end of the parade and the Carlos Correa engagement and all that stuff that we're seeing this week. And then we really get into who's going where, why, how can teams get better? And the first line of business around here was, well, is Buck Showalter going to go manage the Phillies? I mean, I always believe that to be a very, very outside possibility. And then there's, well, let's re-sign Wade Miley and Chris Tillman. And I think to myself, well, that can't be going very well. But there is a whole business side of this going on the backside of all of this that I know you cover so well that really leads into who's going to go where and who's going to sign where. And part of that really happened with this the Asian kid making his way over here, and everyone's going to fight over international players before we even get around to who's going to sign Jake Arrieta, right?
Yeah, and I mean, there's a bunch of stuff. I mean, really, the second the World Series ends, the day after, there'll be a bunch of players that declare for free agency. Qualifying offers are going out left and right, and players are, declining options or accepting them. And it's been kind of interesting to see quite a few players actually accept offers and say they're not going to go anywhere. Whether it's, somebody like Tanaka or Cueto or what have you. There are a number of players that are just like, hey, I'm going to stay where I'm at. I'm happy where I am. There's always that. And I think the biggest thing that we're looking at right now, of course, is kind of the managerial carousel, as I like to call it right now. I think a lot of people were surprised about the situation with Joe Girardi. His goodbye was, a little bit sad. But
I was shocked by that. I had a lot of beat writers on Yankee people. They were very, very shocked by that, and I sort of stand shocked by that. I don't know how you're going to upgrade from Girardi in that situation. That's a tough job, New York Yankees manager, man.
It is. I mean, and look, in my mind, 10 years as a Yankee manager is a lifetime. I mean, look at Billy Martin. I mean, it doesn't matter that George Steinbrenner isn't there. It's the Yankees, so it's always tough. But I thought it was crazy what happened with the Washington Nationals. I thought Bussy Baker got a complete bum rap, and I don't see how they upgrade anymore. Game 167, that's what we're talking about. Not, what they did during the regular season. It was in the postseason. You're basically, a couple plays from going forward. And are you really going to upgrade? So, all this stuff is going on. It's always an interesting time. And then larger term, the one thing that I'm looking at is what are the rule changes going to be for next season? And that's where it gets really interesting because Manfred has said he wants to work with the players, but he can unilaterally, and I don't think he wants to, implement some changes around pace of play. They're going to be really interesting. Do we get a pitch clock? I don't know. Are we going to get a change in the strike zone? Maybe. Are we going to limit mound visits? I think that's really possible. So it's going to be, I think really interesting heading into next year.
Well, who's upset about all that, and who really stands to change it besides Manfred? Who amongst ownership thinks that they don't like pace of play? And, I guess sponsors would always say that. Younger people would always say, give me more meat, give me more action. And I think that's very hard to do when you have this many strikeouts and this many home runs going on and all of these sort of absolute results.
Well, I think the worst thing is that we just get into like micro looking at stuff, right? We're going to pick on a singular game, or we're going to look at the postseason. Here's a great example. Holy crap, we have a 4-hour and 17-minute game in the postseason. Wow, where's your pace of play there? That's just stupid. Well, it's completely different. A 4-hour, 17, barn burner in the postseason is something that is people are going to want to watch. I think that John Thorne, MLB's historian, said it best. more of a good thing is a good thing. What you don't want to have is like, regular season games in April dragging out, 3.5, 4 hours. Those are bad, and those are never going to be good. And pace is really different than time even, right? I mean, what we're trying to do is get it to be more crisp. And so I agree with much of the change that's being requested. People need to quit focusing on the total duration and think about in-game. When you're at a game, it doesn't really have an effect, right? I don't know about you, man, but when I go to a game, I'm hanging out with friends, I'm talking to them, I'm watching the game, or I'm sitting in the press box focusing on it, and there's a lot going on. And
but you can look up and see that it's 9:07 and it's the fourth inning, and you're like, how did we get here? You know what I mean? There is a part of that where you're like, you're not one of the guys that has to get up at 6:18 every morning and catch up. If you are, then you are looking at the clock when you're at the game. You are thinking, I got to get back to Bel Air or Westminster tonight, and it's the fourth inning, and there's a rainstorm coming in, or whatever that is, that at least at an NFL game, and I'll give you this, Maury. I mean, 2 weeks ago in Minnesota, I'm at an NFL game. I had a flight at 6:15 Central Time in Minnesota. I could sort of kind of know the game was going to end at 3, maybe 3:30. If it went to overtime, 3:50, you know what I mean, with the shorter overtime in the NFL. At least I do sort of have some idea when the game's going to end. NBA would be the same way. College basketball's that way. Hockey's pretty, timely in that way. Baseball is the one thing where you go, and if you are sitting there, you're like, this one's dragging. I mean, I feel it at home when I look up and it's 9:30 and it's the fifth inning, and I'm like, wow, they're going to play to 11. This is going to be a 4-hour game tonight, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is a problem, though, with baseball. You're not going to get around it. I mean, are we going to institute a clock like we see in the NFL, NBA, all those sports that you mentioned? No. And the only sport where it's kind of, and even this is fuzzy. I mean, look, soccer, right? We get this added time, which is completely nebulous. You don't know how long it's going to be, injury, added time, all this stuff. You never figure out why they don't just stop the clock in the middle of play, but that's how the sport works. Baseball,
but it's stupid. We were all
right? It ain't over till it's over thing, right? So you're just, it does require an investment by fans. I think it really manifests itself, when you're at home. You start spending more time thinking about stuff, and I'm going to get more distracted. But I just get back to it. I think that it'll be interesting to see, the strike zone is always something that I think is a little bit interesting, but it's going to be that pitch clock. And I don't know if you've ever attended a game, Nestor, with a pitch clock, but man, after a while, you completely forget about it. And if you looked at like the Arizona Fall League that was on MLB Network, they were showing basically like the All-Star game. It's crisp, it's fast, it moves like it probably should, and I don't have a problem with it. I think that like anything, right? Remember there was this huge uproar, man. We need to have 4 pitches for walks. Now you're just going to go ahead and you're going to give that guy first base, and I miss all that stuff. Well, everybody makes a huge freaking uproar about it, and about a month later, it's gone. We've moved on to something else. I mean, kind of the landscape where we're at. Everybody's moving on to the next thing. So I'll be interested to see once the pitch clock's in there. It'll make a huge amount of noise, and then I'll be interested to see how long that noise tails off once it's implemented.
He is Maury Brown. He is Bizball Maury out on Twitter as well as at Forbes Magazine. You can find him out on Twitter. He is tweeting about all things the business of sports, but specifically on the baseball side. And this is where the money meets the road, right? I mean, the Astros win this World Series after having blown it all up and built it all back up from scratch. It was a great, great baseball season all the way around. Now we get into this hot stove where money starts flying, free agents start flying, and teams and fan bases like ours here in Baltimore say, well, I just watched the Astros and the Dodgers and the Yankees play, and we're a long way away from being that, and how do we get there? The Orioles are as complex a mess this offseason as any franchise in the sport, Maury.
Well, and there's a lot of them, Nestor. I mean, I think the big thing, I was talking to an executive at baseball yesterday, and I said, the big concern, I think, is that what you're going to see is they're going to be, like anything that's popular, right? Music, movies, whatever it is. There's something that happens that's really successful, and then everybody goes, you know what, we need to copy that. And it's happened in baseball. If you think about the 2014-15 Royals and the keep the line moving thing, it was an idea about, just keep, hitting it in play. You may ground out, but you're putting so much pressure on the defense that eventually they're going to make a mistake, and we're going to go ahead and do that. And everybody's like, oh, okay, let's do that. And I think that what you're going to see now is, of course, you're going to get I think you're going to see a change in like, hey, we need guys throwing more off-speed stuff. This just lighten up the radar gun. Guys are going to catch up to that. That's why we have so many home runs. But the other thing that would be a worry, or maybe it's not, is, you know what? This thing that we've been doing right here where we got our feet in two different pools. One is we're going to try and get a bunch of free agents and extend some. And the other ones is, we're going to try and develop our players at the same time. And they don't line up, right? Either you're getting your veterans tailing off when your other players are starting to improve, or vice versa. And the model, of course, of blowing it up becomes that much more pronounced. It was done to a lesser extent with the Cubs, and now you've seen it full blown with the Astros. I mean, I was Jim Crane's biggest critic when he first did that. I thought it was atrocious. But hey, man, they stockpiled a bunch of great draft picks. I mean, you got to be smart. That's the key. I wonder whether you're going to start to see some teams go, you know what? I mean, I live here in the Pacific Northwest. If the Mariners said, you know what, we're just going to blow it all up. We suck anyway. We've got this futility thing. Let's make the investment now, and we can do that. I think that there would be some people that will go, hey, it worked in Houston. Why not us? So, whether they do that in Baltimore, I have no idea. But I think that there is really the ground being laid. Somebody's going to look around and go, hey, this has happened for a couple of years. Maybe we need to follow that. And I'll be interested to see how many do that, if at all.
If it hasn't been regime change, it's been leadership change. And in the case of the Yankees, the Red Sox, the Nationals, the Orioles are going to have that. You know what I mean? The Orioles are working up on that with Buck Showalter in his last year and Duquette in his last year. Where we get Adam Jones in the last year, Machado in the last year, Brock and Britton. I mean, some real cornerstone guys. And then to your point with the stars lining up, then there's Jonathan Scope, who is that next level of guy that the Orioles better be thinking about giving 80, 90, $100 million to if they want to wrap him up and buy out some years from underneath him. But I'm sure he's wondering, what is the plan? And for the Orioles, things would have to go perfectly to begin with, as they did a few years ago, for things to line up on the back end of McPhail and the front end of Showalter, and having draft picks like Markakis and Wieters and Machado all mature and become players. That's how they wound up in the ALCS a couple of years ago. But then there is this, who's going to be around for the next version of that, and this incredible albatross of the Chris Davis signing, not to mention your old pal Trumbo you sent in here from Seattle, and we wound up signing to a couple of years. But, this is a very one-dimensional team here in a division now that we're just not talking about the Red Sox and Yankees into the future. The future's right now. They were really good this year, and they're going to be better next year, and they're going to have a whole lot of money the year after that.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't to move off of Baltimore, but, man, I have said that 2018 and certainly 2019, look, if the Yankees get under the luxury tax threshold, which then resets the tax rate, right, it's like this huge amount right now. And there are other escalators that were added into the last labor agreement that really is designed to push the Yankees and the Dodgers and their likes down below it. It resets it to 20%. And when that happens and a bunch of great free agents hit the market, Machado or Bryce Harper, the Yankees, I'll say this, I'm going to continue to say this, I can see them absolutely coming back to the World Series and not only getting there, but winning it within the next couple of years. This does not suit well for if you're a Baltimore Orioles fan. And it just creates this problem. You're like, well, we tried, we were really close to that window, we just couldn't get over the hump. And you look at the Tigers, there's another team that was just like right there, they just couldn't quite get past it. And that's difficult because if you look across the aisle at what's happening in Detroit, that to me is probably the model that you start to look at in Baltimore. All right, we got these star players, man, but they're going to hit free agency, and we're either going to eat a bunch of money to really sustain guys as they get older, which may not necessarily mean they get better. And what are we really doing to improve ourselves to get into that position where the Red Sox or where the Yankees are? And that's a tough question. And so, sometimes you just have to sit there and go, we thought we planned well, we just missed it by this much. And Baltimore may be one of those teams. Now, I don't know whether Dan or whether, Angelos, whether the front office is going to do that mindset. But, I mean, you can see some other clubs that have been in that position before, namely Detroit, having to go down that road. I mean, that's where they're at.
He is Bizball Maury out on Twitter as well as at Forbes. He is Maury Brown, the guitarist for the AC/DC cover band Shoot the Thrill as well. So we usually mix a little rock and roll in here. But I'm going to stick to baseball with you. Some thoughts about not just pace of play and all this other stuff going on, but just in general, I thought baseball had a great year, for star power, for young players, for emerging teams, for having a new kind of outside-the-box champion, where the David beats the Goliath in the case of the Astros beating the Dodgers and the Yankees, and along the way the Indians are interesting. I think from that perspective, and you are always the cheerleader saying baseball's not broken. There's a lot of money there. There's a lot going right. It feels broken in Baltimore, quite frankly, and a guy that watched this thing devolve here over the last quarter of a century with the owner. But by and large, it's not broken, and there are a lot of franchises on the come, like Colorado and Arizona, Minnesota, places that got a little taste of it that they shall rise again in the spring.
Oh, that's absolutely true, Nestor. I mean, look, the parity that's going on, right, has been pretty remarkable. Now, look, if you came back when the playoffs started, you'd go, look, the odds the Twins move forward seems to fall. I think a lot of people certainly looked at Houston and went, yeah, man, that's for real. Everybody looked at Cleveland and said, yeah, that's for real. But it was really, once again, I think that Manfred's going to say that, look, it's not perfect. You still have some teams that are hanging around that, should be doing better, or you would hope that they would be doing better, and they're not. The story I'm about ready to write, sponsorships are way up, and they're going to be up. They're making 20% more this year than they did last year. Advertisers are jumping on board with this thing, and that's the story that I'm going to be running here pretty soon on Forbes, is about how much money continues to flow in as the success of the league in terms of the excitement that we saw with the Cubs, to a lesser extent in 2014 and 15 with the long-standing drought that we saw with the Royals, and certainly what we witnessed in terms of having the Dodgers, who hadn't been there since '88, and having Houston win, which was this exciting young crop of players that was really exciting. It's a great time. The league is very high on how things are going. They see it that way. It's all cyclical, though, right? Let's just be honest about this, Nestor. There's going to be a down period. You start to, if the Giants had continued to go on this every other year thing, of course ratings are going to go down. People want fresh blood, and that's not unique in any sport. If you continue to have a Cavs, Warriors, NBA Finals, people are going to finally get burnt out on it. But right now, baseball's in a great place. They're very happy. Revenues are up. Television ratings are up. It's a good time to be Rob Manfred right now.
Maury, always great to visit with you, man. I'm going to send everybody out to Bizball as well. Bizball Maury on Twitter as well as Forbes. And I'm sorry our time is short this time. We'll get together. There'll be plenty of hot stove coming down the pike. Great to have you on, buddy.
Glad we could finally catch up, Nestor. I know we've been playing phone tag. I really appreciate it.
You got it, man. I appreciate the time. There he goes, Maury Brown of Forbes.